The court was never just four walls in East London. It was the place where the Northside Crew trained, settled arguments, built reputation, and decided who belonged in the local futsal scene. After midnight, under fluorescent light and concrete ceilings, a tournament defeat carried a second penalty. The Crew would lose its court access rights for an entire year. The question was not simply how Northside lost the Midnight Cup. It was how one night turned home into territory they no longer controlled. The Midnight Cup was an unsanctioned competition, but its rules mattered. The winner did not receive a polished trophy or a place in an official league. The prize was practical power, control of the only indoor court in the district, and the authority to decide when that court could be used. For crews playing outside the formal system, that was not a symbolic reward. It was training space, meeting space, and social ground. Northside arrived with the advantage every home crew understands. They knew the surface. They knew how the ball moved under the court's particular lights. They knew which areas became crowded when the game tightened, and which teammates could be trusted when a match narrowed into 5-minute bursts. Across from them stood the Southside Kings, the rivals who had spent the tournament testing that confidence through 3 brutal matches. The full score lines and minute-by-minute records are not part of the available account, so the exact sequence has to be treated carefully. What is clear is the outcome and its structure. Northside did not lose one isolated game and immediately vanish. The rivalry unfolded across 3 matches, with each result increasing the pressure around the next. By the end, the tournament had become a test of tactical discipline, internal trust, and control of the court itself. In futsal, a small mistake expands quickly. There are fewer players, less space, and almost no safe place to hide after possession is lost. A defender steps out too early, a pass travels half a second late, and the opposition is already attacking the gap behind it. The Northside Crew had the talent to compete, but the tournament account points toward tactical mistakes rather than a simple difference in ability. One issue was the cost of defending emotionally. Northside and Southside were not meeting as strangers. Every challenge carried the history of the rivalry, and every successful dribble seemed to demand an answer. Instead of protecting the shape of the team, Northside could be pulled toward individual battles. In 5-a-side futsal, that creates open lanes. The ball moves faster than pride can recover. The Southside Kings understood that pressure. Their advantage was not necessarily a spectacular trick or a single dominant player. It was the ability to make Northside react. When the Northside press arrived at the wrong moment, Southside could play around it. When Northside dropped back, Southside could circulate the ball and wait. The tactical battle was less about constant attack than forcing the other crew to choose between 2 uncomfortable options. That matters because pressing is a collective decision. One player closes the ball, another covers the passing lane, and a third protects the space behind them. If only one person goes, the press becomes an invitation. The tournament account identifies Northside's tactical errors, but it does not provide enough detail to assign every mistake to a particular player. The broader pattern is clearer. The crew's aggression stopped functioning as a unit. Northside also needed a reliable pivot. The forward who receives the ball with their back to goal and tries to hold play up or turn under pressure. A pivot can give a team an escape when defenders are pushing high. Without that outlet, every clearance becomes another attack for the opponent. Northside's problem was not just losing the ball, it was losing the moments that should have allowed them to breathe. By the second meeting, the court was carrying more than a match. The first result had changed expectations, and expectation changes movement. Players hesitate before taking the risky pass. Teammates start demanding the ball instead of trusting the next run. On the sideline, a missed rotation can look like carelessness, even when it began as confusion. The Southside Kings were now competing against Northside's opponents and against the anxiety created by the tournament itself. This is where the social cost begins. In an official league, a defeat can be absorbed into a schedule. Another fixture arrives, another venue waits, and access is usually governed by institutions outside the player's control. In the Midnight Cup, court access rights were part of the competition. Losing meant that Northside would not simply surrender status. They would surrender the physical place that made their crew possible. The court had become home through repetition. Players knew who arrived early, who brought the spare ball, who stayed after the final game, and which younger competitors were allowed into the rotation. None of that required a formal charter. It was enforced through custom and recognition. The Northside Crew's authority came from being present there, night after night. The Cup converted that informal authority into a prize that could be transferred. For Southside, winning therefore meant more than taking a rival's name off a bracket. It offered a chance to rewrite the neighborhood's competitive map. The Kings could bring their own crews, their own expectations, and their own version of who the court was for. That did not automatically make them villains, and the available material does not support claims of intimidation or wrongdoing. But it did create a new balance of power, one Northside had not prepared to accept. The third match became the turning point because Northside had fewer places to retreat. Their tactical mistakes were no longer separate incidents. They had become a pattern visible to both sides. A rushed attack could expose the defense. A complaint could fracture communication. A player trying to repair one error could create another. Southside only needed to keep the game unstable long enough for Northside's urgency to work against them. The phrase home court advantage usually suggests comfort. Here, it also meant responsibility. Northside had to protect the court's identity while defending its access. That made every decision heavier. A conservative pass could be read as fear. A direct challenge could be read as commitment. The crew was trying to win a futsal tournament and prove that its claim to the space still deserved to exist. After the loss, the damage moved indoors and outward at the same time. Inside the crew, the defeat exposed divisions that victory might have concealed. The tournament account connects the result to internal conflict, but it does not identify every disagreement or assign blame to specific individuals. What can be understood is the pressure point. When a team loses access to its home, players naturally argue about whether the failure came from tactics, attitude, preparation, or leadership. Those arguments matter because an underground crew has no guaranteed recovery system. There is no official development pathway waiting to absorb the players, and no administrator required to keep the group together. If training becomes irregular, the strongest players may look elsewhere. If younger players stop seeing Northside at the court, the crew loses more than matches. It loses continuity, the slow process through which a local identity survives. The community around the court felt that shift as well. A venue can function as a meeting point without appearing on any public map. Players bring friends, relatives, rivals, and younger hopefuls into the same space. The court creates contact between people who might otherwise remain divided by neighborhood lines. When access changes hands, those relationships do not disappear, but they are reorganized. Some become visitors. Some stop coming. Others wait to see whether the new holders will make room. For Northside, the most immediate consequence was the full year without exclusive access. That time limit turned a defeat into a countdown. A short-term loss can be answered with a rematch. A year forces adaptation. The crew had to find other places to train or accept that its rhythm would weaken. Every alternative carried a cost in travel, availability, atmosphere, or legitimacy. Home had been convenient, but it had also been the foundation. The Southside Kings inherited that foundation with the pressure of their own. Control of a court is not permanent simply because a tournament awards it. The new holders would have to maintain the space's social balance, manage rival crews, and prove that their authority could survive beyond one night. Winning changed the question from who was strongest to who could carry responsibility without turning access into exclusion. That is why the Midnight Cup cannot be reduced to a final result. Its hidden rules were always about belonging. The formal contest measured who could win under pressure, but the informal contest measured who could remain connected to the place afterward. Northside lost both at once. Their tactical errors opened the door, yet the consequences came from the court system built around the tournament. The defeat also exposed the limits of reputation. Northside's home status had been earned through presence, but presence is fragile when rights are attached to a single competition. A crew can feel permanent until the result says otherwise. Then every familiar detail becomes temporary. The usual warm-up, the expected welcome, the assumption that next week will look like last week. Still, losing the court did not erase the Northside Crew. It forced the identity to travel. Players had to decide whether the crew was a place, a lineup, or a commitment between people. That decision could not be settled by a trophy. It would be tested in the months when the court belonged to someone else, when training became harder, and when loyalty was no longer rewarded by convenience. The wider underground league learned the same lesson. In official sport, territory is usually managed by organizations. In unsanctioned futsal, territory can be negotiated through custom, competition, and control of scarce space. The Midnight Cup made that reality visible. A match could determine who trained, who hosted, who gathered, and whose name carried weight on the next tournament night. So how did the Northside Crew lose their home court after the Midnight Cup? They lost it through a chain of pressure, a rivalry that demanded reactions, a press that stopped working collectively, an attack without enough control, and internal divisions that turned mistakes into mistrust. Southside won the three-match battle, but the deeper result was social. Northside discovered that home is not guaranteed by history. In underground futsal, home belongs to whoever can defend it, organize it, and keep the community with them.